Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and with me, my co-host, Deb Romero, certified Alexander Technique instructor. Although I did do a podcast with Dr. Hancock, so
Yay!
yay. Um,
And equestrian. I mean, we're all riders, so
yes,
yes.
absolutely. So today's topic is about, what did I call it? Creating the space to learn.
Mm,
And this is something, whether we're talking about sort of that conversation we have with our horse, which are aids and contacts, that's how we speak and listen to the horse, or like just setting up a situation where we're not having to direct our horse all the time.
that's
Like,
a good point. I call it setting things up for success.
yeah,
Always being adaptable and open to really even though we have goals of what we want to do that day, is the horse on the same page as we are?
well, there's that,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
what I mean too is like, I think, especially if we're sort of competitive minded,
Mm,
every ride is like we're at the show. And we're
wow, that's
we're
powerful.
like if we're let's just talk space between aids and contacts.
Hmm.
So to me, an aid is when we're talking to our horse. And physically, an aid is generated, we should say, anytime we tighten a muscle, any muscle in our body.
Yes.
So even just the act of us balancing our torso in the saddle or the cart is already giving aids, resisting.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's resisting
They can be
various.
positive or negative. They can be helpful or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I call aids helpful. Like I always call aids guidance.
Guidance. Okay.
And what's not an aid that is an activity is like, I guess, putting our horse out of balance, which I wouldn't call an aid. I would call it a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
Mwah.
Yeah. So when our horse moves our seat around left, right, forward, back, or we're scooching in the saddle, driving with our seat,
Right.
hammering away with our legs and spurs, like that's no longer an aid. I go, that is so many different chaotic forces that we're generating from our body that we're actually making our horse less comfortable,
That's
less
a good point.
organized,
Hmm.
less balanced.
It's like micromanaging. It's like that it's just way over the top to me.
Yeah, it's
Because
like
it
having a bad boss over, looking over your
look,
shoulder every minute. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. But we could
I
say,
agree.
I guess we could say, whether it's positive or negative, anytime we're making a gesture with our body and
Hmm.
changing muscle tone or shifting weight, we're generating forces of motion,
Right.
right? Those forces of motion travel in specific directions and have a specific amount. If we go all the way back to our Newton's laws of motion podcasts, right?
Right.
And so those directions and amounts of force impact our horse. So I guess we could say it impacts our horse in a helpful way or not a helpful way.
That's
Adds,
that's how I see it. It's just that simple.
yeah,
It's either helpful or not.
yeah. So aids are us generating force that influences our horse. I guess we could say
Right.
positive or negative. So then what's a contact? I go, a
Hmm.
contact is when we shut up and we listen, right? So the contact, and we can have a seat contact, a leg contact, a rein contact,
Hmm.
even when we're lunging our horse or leading our horse, we have a contact through the lead rope or the lunge line or the long reins, right? Or even if we place our hand on our horse when we're grooming, that's a physical contact. So a contact is just a touch without resistance.
Yeah, I would add, it's like you're listening. You're
Yeah,
receiving information instead of giving information. You're more open to being receptive.
Yeah. And in that moment of contact, what are you listening to? And I'm
Hmm.
always listening to what's the energy? Where are the forces of motion going? Because forces
Mm.
of motion, by definition, always have a specific direction and
Hmm.
magnitude. So there's a specific direction. It might be many, which can be confusing,
Yep.
but there are specific directions and amounts. And that's what
Good point.
I'm feeling and becoming aware of those directions and amounts of force when I refrain from tightening muscles, whether I'm
Yeah,
in the saddle or on the ground.
and it goes back to, we've talked about this before, it's goes down to the proprioceptor level. If we're tightening, we can't listen.
You can't receive.
You can't receive.
Yeah.
If you're giving an aid, whether positive or negative, you're not listening. You can't really do both at once.
Right. Even when we accidentally talk over each other, it's like that's chaos. One of us has to shut up and go back to a contact.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so that conversation is we listen by quieting our bodies, suppling our muscles, and refraining from activity.
Mhm.
That's when we receive information, right? And when we activate muscle, consciously shift weight, adjust our skeleton, make a gesture, pull on a rope, whatever,
Mm,
that's an aid. And so the conversation is talking and listening and talking and listening because I don't see how. And I see it happen all the time, and it doesn't usually play out well. But how do we know how to give an appropriate aid
mm.
at the right time, in the right place, with just the right amount of resistance if we don't pause long enough to listen, right?
Yeah.
So what I see is like I just did this month's newsletter on your horse is not lazy, right? I go, horses are not lazy, they're mechanically malfunctioning. That's why they don't want
Right.
to go forward, right? And so we assume, oh, my horse is just lazy. And so if we think lazy versus mechanical malfunction, we kind of justify constantly pushing our horse.
And that's real important topic, because are our thoughts and our words that we're thinking getting in the way of positive reinforcement?
Oh, I'm going to make a note for another podcast.
That one.
Thoughts and words.
Yeah, because
Um,
if we say, if we, it's the same thing when I'm working with somebody with Alexander. If we know when somebody says sit down, what that means, but are we using ourselves to the best of our abilities when we do that? So if we say the horse isn't going forward and we translate that into our thought, oh, he's lazy, how does that set up the communication
right.
of energy? Because horses function much more on energy than we ever can imagine. What kind of energy thought are we sending with that thought?
Usually, get your butt in gear, right?
Smack, smack.
Smack, smack. Um,
Instead of going, well, isn't that interesting? How could I think of that differently? Well,
well,
how
and
do
what
I?
I mean by mechanical malfunction is I go, if a horse isn't an efficient mover with good coordination, the side effect of that, the mechanical malfunction, is instability during motion,
Mhm.
especially through the axial skeleton, which we've talked about endlessly, or discomfort in motion.
Right.
And
Pain, discomfort,
not
anything.
even pain. It's
Right.
just labored. It's just if the
It's not
horse
efficient.
is if the axial skeleton is unstable, the muscles automatically overwork so that the
Hmm.
horse doesn't fall over, so the body is stable. So any horse, usually the ones that don't want to go forward, look muscle bound. They almost
Mm.
look like they have lots of tight muscles or a lot of muscle. And what they're doing is stabilizing the body muscularly, because underneath all that muscle, there's an unstable skeletal coordination.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go, it's not comfortable, it's not fuel efficient,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like moving forward. And coming back around to that aids and contacts and creating the space for learning, ironically, those horses are constantly pushed with the whip on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
The rider starts scooching and driving with the seat, or
Mm-hmm.
hammering with heavy leg aids all the time,
Right.
or goes for the spurs, or they get a harsh crack with the whip. And it's like all of those tactics make the horse less comfortable. So I go, it's
And
not
probably
resolving the problem.
and less trusting of us, I would think.
Yeah, they're just going to become more guarded,
Right.
and it doesn't resolve the issue of the malfunction of
Good point.
skeletal instability and muscular suppleness. So I go, if we don't resolve the problem, the horse just looks at us like we're mean and crazy. Like, why would, not really looking forward to the work sessions anymore.
Or like the horse hard to catch in the pasture. Hello.
Yeah, or a lot of times horses that get called lazy will tend to go to the fight defensive strategy, because if movement feels unstable or uncomfortable, then fight is a much easier defense than flight. And
That's a good
so
point.
they tend to be snarky, aggressive, pushy, sour expressions, maybe nipping, maybe turning around to bite when you groom or girth. And that kind of goes hand in hand. And all of it is our horse telling us, I, I'm not efficient. I'm not an efficient mover. So this really sucks for me.
Mm,
And if we come back around to aids and contacts, I go, the way horses learn to find stability in motion and learn to find a different coordination that allows comfort in motion is through trial and error.
right.
So if we're kind of doing our horse's job for them, or taking over our
Wow.
horse's homework or learning, we're not creating the space for the horse to ever learn that for themselves, because constant aids never leave any room for error.
There's no
There's,
room for listening either because we're in that drive mode of constant giving information.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the first space I want to create for my horse to learn self-carriage and learn how to balance better, become an efficient mover, is that space between my aids,
Right.
right? And lots of people tell me, like, it's a kind of an adult learner mammoth wall, is this, I can't feel anything. I don't have feel. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what I feel. All of that. And just getting people to feel, sometimes I have to create the space just for that.
Yes. They have to learn they may have to let go of some thought process of what they think is the way to feel. And they
That's such a good point, because
yeah.
what I often hear is people are trying to feel something
Yes.
specific and then
Yes.
telling me they can't feel.
Right, because we already have a preconceived thought of what it should feel like instead of just being open to listening.
What do I feel?
What it yeah,
Yeah. I go, we all
it's
feel something, otherwise we would fall off the horse. I mean, obviously,
I would think so.
if we're capable of staying up on the horse during motion, then we're at least feeling enough to not fall off.
Mhm.
So what is it that we're feeling that helps us not fall off? Because that's already happening.
We're feeling sensations, but we also go back to what I said before. If we're tense and we're tightening, we can't hear anything.
Right. Right.
So if we're taught to grip, we're not going to feel anything under that gripping.
And this is why to explain how to put more space between the aids so that the horse
Mm,
has a bigger margin of error in order to learn. We're giving our horse more space to make a mistake to the point that the horse realizes they made a mistake, and then we step in with an aid and offer a solution, right? And with a rider who says they can't feel, and this is true even with super experienced riders, and sometimes professional riders have the strongest habits. And in order to change one small habit, we kind of have to go really slow and go back to something simple.
oh
So
yeah,
whether it's
that's yeah.
an adult beginner or an experienced rider, it doesn't matter. When people say they can't feel, I'll start leading the horse around on the ground
Mhm.
and just let them be in the saddle. Like having
Yes.
100% of the time just to be aware internally. What do I
Hmm.
feel? What are the internal sensations that I'm experiencing? What are the forces of motion that are affecting my body? Those are coming from the horse. And every time,
And there's a direct connection, like you said, if you go to start to lead somebody and you take away the hands,
oh, that's a biggie. Yeah.
that's a huge thing. If anybody can practice that and feel safe to take away your hands, because that will truly tell you where you're balancing from. You
Yes.
will truly get connected very quickly.
Yeah. And in the process of finding balance, I'll have people put their hands on the front of the saddle or the
Mhm.
horse's neck or touch the mane or even grab mane or grab the saddle, whatever. The
Right.
hands, our hands can help us stabilize, but it doesn't need to be on the reins. It could be
Exactly.
on the saddle or the neck instead of the reins. And getting the hands out of the equation because developing feel and having these awarenesses of energy and forces of motion is all done through our sense of touch. We all have a sense of touch,
Right.
right? So it's a matter of refining it to be good with horses. That's
I
what
like that.
develops our feel, is just refining it. And like I have zero ear for music. I can't tell the difference between the notes. Like I couldn't pick out an A sharp or a C flat. Like I got no idea,
I
right?
have no clue.
Some people can do it like that. And I go, that's
Mhm.
a refinement of our sense of hearing.
Right.
I'm sure if I had a coach, I could learn to do that if I wanted to learn to do that. But it doesn't,
Time and yeah, a lot of
yeah,
time
but it
to
doesn't come naturally to me. But that
me either.
just because it doesn't come naturally to me doesn't mean I'm not capable of learning it.
Right.
And I have the innate sense of hearing, so I know it's possible, right?
Right.
And the same thing when it comes to horses. I go, our sensitivity is in our fingertips, but we have skin everywhere. Like all of our skin could be as sensitive as our
It's the
fingertips.
largest organ in the body, so
Absolutely.
use it.
And then we have fascia, tendon, ligament, muscle, all this soft tissue can be part of tactile sensation. And even an awareness of what we're feeling emotionally. I go, that's a
That's
sensation.
huge.
That's also kind of, we perceive it through our sense of touch, even though it's internal and it's not very tangible.
It's
And
like the
so,
subconscious conversation.
right. And
Yeah,
we experience it as a feeling. That's what we call
exactly.
it because it's through our kinesthetic sense, our sense of touch. And so just putting someone on their horse, and typically I have them drop their stirrups, but be in a saddle because the saddle can be a big stimulation, and then put their hands on the front of the saddle or the neck, and then either me or a helper just leads the horse around. And
Right.
the first thing that can come up is fear because the person is giving up control over the horse.
They
And
think
I,
so. Yeah, I totally agree with that. They go to startle sometimes.
yeah, so for
Yeah,
feeling safe is the only way you can start to relax your soft
exactly.
tissues enough that you can feel anything. So safety is sort of the first layer. And I
Right.
might, stop or have the rider get on and off or whatever until they feel 100% safe. And then for our balance, that's all through our sense of touch. It's all feel. And and
It's a
and
kinesthetic awareness that just
yeah,
goes right up through the spine, central nervous system to the brain. It's direct connect.
yeah. And it's funny because especially with advanced riders, maybe when they were a kid or maybe never have they been led around on a horse or put on a lunge line. And I go, I think that is one of the most valuable things we can
Right.
do. Like to me, that's creating space for learning. If we want to improve our riding, whether we're going from complete novice to beginner rider or from beginner to intermediate or even intermediate to advanced, right? What a professional rider is able to do is keep their balance no matter how the horse moves. That's the refinement of balance as a rider is
Right.
if the horse doesn't do what you want or bucks, rears, bolts, has a meltdown, doesn't go left when doesn't go right, won't go forward, won't slow down, all of those different issues that the horse is throwing at us throw our balance, make our balance harder.
True.
And so
Yeah.
if we don't set up an environment where we have the space to just feel what we feel and
Right. Instead of putting a label on the outcome or what exactly is happening at that moment.
or thinking that every single time we get on a horse, we have to get the horse to balance in order for us to balance. I go, no, it's the other way around.
It's totally the other way around. I
Yeah.
see horses improve much faster when the rider is focusing on their balance first.
Well, to me, my body is the tool, the force
Right.
management tool for helping my horse balance because all forces of motion are going to go through my body, whether they're mine or the horses, they're still
Right.
coming into me, right?
Exactly.
And not having that separation of our body from the horse's movement is a big problem.
So
And
say that
so,
again. Go over that again.
so like beginner riders or even intermediate riders, it's hard to work on our own balance. So the easier solution appears to be go buy a better horse. That's like the human logic. Go get a better horse, get your horse trained so you don't have to think so hard.
Have somebody else do it, right?
Yeah, but I
Good
go,
point.
it's too dynamic. It's all physics. So even if I prepare a horse to the highest levels of balance and self-carriage, an unbalanced novice rider can undo that because
Exactly.
an unstable rider is creating forces of motion that the horse has to cope with, right?
Right.
And so as we go, like the toughest transition for us as humans is to go from the kind of level of riding skill where we feel pretty competent, right? We feel like, yeah, I can stay on a lot of different horses.
Yeah.
I'm
The I
pretty
got
good at
this butt.
riding. I got this. And to go from that level to an elite level is the hardest part of the journey. Like to get from beginner to pretty darn good is actually the easier part of learning how to ride. But to go from pretty darn
Mhm.
good to really good or elite, that is like everything is backwards. Everything we thought we knew is completely upside down.
And you
And
see it in all sports. I mean, I saw it with my kids in karate. A lot of the kids went halfway, and they felt like, "Okay, that's enough. I'm good. I got
mm,
this." And then there's the kids like mine who said, "No, I want to take it to
As
black belt level and competition level. That's a whole nother experience
because the
when
closer
you make
you
that
get
commitment.
to an elite level of sports, it becomes more difficult because the devil's really in the detail. Like it becomes
Yeah,
a refinement of these gross coordinations
I
or
agree.
gross motor
Hmm.
skills. And same with learning to ride. And so whatever level we're currently riding at, I go, if we want to improve our riding, we need two things. We need the space to learn. And it
Hmm.
does, our balance has zero to do with how our horse moves. So the first thing is, who cares how your horse moves? Ride what your horse gives you, balance on what your horse gives you. And if you're not feeling safe enough to just be a passenger on your horse in an enclosed area, then have somebody lead your horse or lunge your horse.
Hmm.
And just putting 100% of our awareness on ourselves is exactly how we move to that elite level.
I
That's what it
agree.
takes.
Hmm.
And it,
And
and
like you said, creating the space that's in your own mind and physical space, it's both.
right, right. And being humble enough to go back to what seems like a beginner level. That's
Hmm.
another part of moving to an elite level or really refining balance. And so giving ourselves permission, I go, what we really need is somebody leading our horse around or lunging because our brain not really knowing what our horse is going to do
Hmm.
next is what improves our balance and our timing because that's the truth
Yeah.
of it. And
I totally agree.
as soon as we give aids, we think we know where our horse is going, but that's not always going to be the case.
That does not always happen that way.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, well, I thought I asked for blah, 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 but you went blah.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. That was a
okay. Well, that was
surprise.
curious. Okay.
Yeah.
Instead of tightening around it and trying to pull them into our thought process
Yeah,
of what it should be.
that's where we start abusing
Yeah,
aids.
that's where we
Yes.
get overwhelming, I would think, to the horse. That's
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Because instead of sort of
Yeah.
going, well, I pulled the right rein. I thought we were going right. Somehow we're going left. All right, we're going left.
We're
The
going left.
normal,
Let's make the best of it.
yeah, the normal human response is, oh my God, and pull harder and get panicky and move faster and get tighter because I thought I was going to the right and my horse is taking me to the left. And
Right.
so
It's that
that,
adaptability that we're lacking, is being adaptable to listening to what the
yeah.
horse is giving us.
And when our balance is independent of our horse's movement, there's a security in that. That you just
Huge.
you don't overreact to every little mistake your horse makes. You can give your horse the space. You can give your horse
Right.
a much bigger margin of error in between the aids, and your aids, because you can listen, because you're balanced independently, your aids are just more appropriate. They're more
And
accurate.
they're more accurate, more timely,
Hmm.
more in sync, if you want to hear that language. Like when you feel that rhythm, whatever you want to call it, synergy, it is like you just crave it after that.
Yeah.
you s- you constantly seek that because there I don't know what other words to use, harmony, um,
Y-
frequency, whatever, that it's so awesome when you get there.
Yeah, it just feels easy and enjoyable.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's like watching, like you always use like dancers, like really good couple, or
Hmm.
figure skaters and couples. It's
And
just the
it's a lot of work
synchronization.
to
It's
make
a
it look
lot of
that
work to get
easy.
there.
Yeah. To be graceful and fluid is a boatload of repetitive, slow work.
R- Mistake after mistake after mistake after
Mhm.
mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I keep starting this train of thought and then I derail. So let me spit this out because if we want to improve our balance, I keep saying there's two things. One is have somebody else guide our horse.
Mhm.
Lunge line, lead line, doesn't matter, or be a complete passenger
Mhm.
unless you have to steer for safety or whatever. But
Right.
give ourselves the space to just feel what we feel and let our sense of touch become more and more refined, especially through our legs and seat and core. And, oh my God, get pictures and video.
Yeah, because you're
Get pictures
thinking
and video.
the
Our,
debauched kinesthetics that we create in our own little head may not be so true.
well, our brain is super powerful at normalizing dysfunction and
Exactly.
overriding discomfort we might find in our body. Our body
Mhm.
is actually better at telling us when we're balanced. Because, like you said, the feeling is ease, it's good, it's stable, you feel safe. You're not using as much grippy muscle. You're sort of
Right,
using more tone, but you're not overexerting through the arms and legs.
right.
And so, if we pause long enough, hang on. Sorry about that. If we pause or even give ourselves permission to experiment, right?
I like that. Or giving ourselves permission to experiment and let go of the thought that I have to be in control.
Even of your
That's a
own body. Yes.
right. Can I
Yeah.
allow that? Can I just get on my horse and when he goes towards the arena fence, let him figure out which way he's going and just ride what he gives you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That
that's
is the
kind of
most
scary the first time you
hilarious.
do it. You're like, "Go left, go left, go left," and they go right, and you're like, "Oh."
Yeah. No, I watch people have that moment of panic
Yeah,
in an enclosed area in a passenger ride. It's like I have to remind people. I go, look, if your horse isn't going to jump the fence or plow through the fence, then he's probably going to turn.
we're all good.
I
They're
go,
gonna and then you
horses,
get to feel what it's like when they initiate
the turn.
a turn, a thought, a movement, and then you're gonna be
Yeah.
a much better rider because you're gonna be way ahead of the timing and feel is gonna get so much better.
Yeah, exactly. Because you feel the horse's body follow the horse's thought rather
Exactly.
than trying to get the horse to follow our thoughts. You learn to listen and you understand what the horse is thinking. But it's so funny when the horse heads to the corner or the gate or the
I
rail,
know, I love it.
people cannot refrain from picking up a rein.
I know,
And I
it's so
go,
hard.
I go, just give leg, and your horse is either going to turn if they're moving, they're going to turn or go through it or go over it. Those are their options. I said, but if you allow the halt, so people allow the horse to halt and then grab the rein for steering. I go, just give a little leg and don't allow the horse to halt, and he's going to turn left or right. And you're going to feel
Correct.
the decision almost a split second before it happens. I go,
Yeah,
that's the kind of feel we're capable of.
right.
Yeah, I love passenger rides. And to me, it's kind of like I love roller coasters. I go, I love being on a Disney ride where you don't know what's going to happen next. And that's what I like about passenger rides. I got no
Mhm.
idea where my horse is going to go next or what's going to happen. And so it really tunes you in. And I used to do them on full moon nights where it was kind of dark, and that
Right.
really takes away your sense of control and
And
taps
that's a
you
good point.
into the feel.
We put so much focus on seeing, and it's the relationship between you and the horse is not that. It's all
No,
about
and
feel.
it's all about feel. Yes, and that's even closing our eyes for a step or two, or
That's my favorite.
if we don't feel safe to close our eyes, shifting from focal vision into our peripheral vision.
Mhm.
So we let our eyes kind of dart around. We notice what we can see either side without looking at it directly. And as soon as we shift into our peripheral vision, for some reason, I don't know why, it sort of wakes up our self-awareness. We just can feel things more clearly when we get out of our focal vision and use our peripheral
Mhm.
vision. Or ride in
Yeah,
the dark or close your eyes for as many steps as you feel safe to do so,
right.
right? But it is, yeah, without that vestibular kind of,
The
what is it?
vestibular apparatus going
Yeah,
on. Yep.
yeah, it really, all of a sudden, your sense of balance shifts from is it, I forget what it's called. I guess it is the vestibular apparatus, the eyes and the
Mhm.
ears.
The eyes, ears, nose, the fluid
Okay.
in
So
there.
when you close your eyes, it's like automatically all the proprioceptors in your muscles kick in. It's a weird sensation when you
They're
go to,
listening. They can be in a listening frame of mind instead of a doing frame of mind.
yes. And we usually think
Yeah.
our body is doing, and as long as our head's balanced, we're okay. And the brain's perfectly happy with that because brains are super powerful at normalizing dysfunction.
Mhm.
And that's why we need a helper and we need to create space to learn and we need some visual feedback
Right.
because
Whether it's video or mirrors or
I don't even think
pictures or
mirrors are good. Like I think you need pictures and
really?
video. Yeah. And you need pictures and videos of seeing yourself straight at the camera, directly away
Uh,
from the camera, front to back, and then side views left and right. Because we can look at those pictures and we can draw a straight line from our seat bones to our head and then see, are we ahead of the vertical, behind the vertical? Are we bending our spine too much anywhere? Is our axial skeleton actually vertical or is it all squished up, right? And from the front to back view, we can go, our feet level to each other? Do our
right.
knees look symmetrical? Is our belt line straight or is it kind of tilted left or right? Do our shoulders look symmetrical, right?
Mhm.
Because that has nothing to do with how the horse moves. That's
Right.
something we balance and can do for ourselves. And what always happens without exception, and I realized before the advent of smartphones where I could take a picture and show it to somebody right then and there, as soon as I would adjust somebody's balance, they would start asking me my credentials. Who did I study with? What level did I show? Because their brain is screaming, this can't be right.
It can't be true. This can't be true.
And that brains hate change. Like I go, once I realize that, I don't take it personally. It's not that big a deal. I go, all brains hate change. And when we're changing our internal coordination, that is like
Mhm.
a three-alarm fire in our brain.
It's like updating the software in your computer, you know?
Well, hopefully without crashing, but that's why
Yeah,
we
oh,
need.
yeah, like my iPhone. My iPhone crashed with an update. That was not cool.
Yeah. And that's what I think brains do. It's like I try to
It
give an
crashes.
update and
They
they just
do.
crash. And I go, okay, let's
Some do.
reboot. And I actually call it rebooting two things. I know as soon as we even explore, even if we're on our own, what is wrong with purposefully leaning too far forward, leaning too far back, leaning too far to one side
Mhm.
or the other, just to sort of explore our own coordination and what it feels like. And just doing something like that can give us a new sense of where vertical lives. But
Yeah, yeah, I also play the game of if I'm just you could be just sitting on your horse. Can I, without stirrups, bend one knee as far up as I can, and how does that affect my seat?
right.
Yeah, just something simple like that. Like if you're having an off day and you don't really want to ride, but just something that simple to feel like, do I totally shift my body weight when I bend one knee?
Yeah, or I'll have people go from jockey position with their ankles
Mhm.
on the seat of the saddle, all the way into sort of as fully lengthened as possible without stirrups and play in between sort of those two positions of being
Right.
fully lengthened and almost having our spine horizontal over the horse. and just play with leg length, right? Because we get really fixed, and what our brain is happy with is the exact stirrup length, the exact way we ride in this particular saddle. And if you change it, there's going to be a problem in your head. Like that's going to start a helmet
Yep.
fire. And
Yep.
so,
It's called adaptability. It's kind of like, between especially you getting on different horses, different saddles, different stirrup lengths. Technically, if you have created the space for adaptability and listening, none of that matters.
and I think that's the reason that's like the number one recommendation for people who want to ride at an elite level is they're always told,
Mhm.
go get on a bunch of different horses. And it's a little bit of a sink or swim technique because you're
True.
hoping that on every different horse and every different saddle, you end up finding what is in common, which is your own balance between all those
Hmm.
different feels and forces. But I go, we could just learn to balance, even if we only have one
Right.
horse. But what we have to do that isn't usually part of traditional riding instruction is experiment. Don't
The
try to hold a
experimentation. Yeah.
don't try to hold a position. Tell your brain we're just going on a reconnaissance tour through the body and we're going to find out how shit works. That's all we're going to do. If I do this, what
Yep.
happens over there? Because it's all connected.
Right.
And
Just be curious to listen to what you, like you said, what happens when I put my heels down? What happens, all those instructions that were given,
yeah,
truly what happens?
yeah, because the harder we try to get things right, the more we get stuck at a
We
level
get
of
Mhm.
mediocrity, or maybe we get stuck at a level of proficiency, but we can't advance. And the same is true with the horses. And so, no matter what level we currently ride at, and I do it pretty regularly, especially if I get on a horse I've never ridden before, I'm 99% listening and just keeping my balance and listening to that horse so that I know what to do to help that horse because I don't
It's
know.
kind of like getting a new pair of shoes to me. Because you put on a new pair of shoes and you go, oh, well, that's different. But then you normalize it after a while, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So we always want to be asking that question. Am I just being the normalcy of it, or am I still open and creating space for listening to what's really going on?
Yeah. And getting some visual feedback, whether
Yeah.
it's pictures of us or videotape while we're experimenting, while we're on the lunge
Yeah.
line or passenger
Yeah.
riding, we can see for ourselves what that looks like because the brain is going to tell us anything outside of the normal default setting is just flat out wrong and
It's just
bad.
a no.
It's just a big fat no, don't do that. And so and our, we can ask our brain just to pause the input. The other thing that I actually call rebooting is when somebody's struggling, when the brain is screaming, this change of coordination or balance or writing is
Mhm.
wrong. I go, okay, go to the normal, let your brain be happy. But in the normal, where's your body weight? Where's your muscle tightness? Where's your muscle suppleness? How's your stability through your seat bones? What do you notice in your body in that use? Now we're going to go to
Mhm.
this new use. One or two little changes doesn't take much. And for a few strides, you're just going to tell your brain, we'll be back. Don't panic. We're just going to explore. And then you notice, what does my body have to say in this different use? And you may find, oh, wow, my leg muscles really relaxed, but I feel an activation somewhere deep in my core, or my weight shifted automatically. My seat
Right.
doesn't feel as heavy. My feet feel heavier in the stirrups, right? I'm not gripping as much with my legs. All
Right.
kinds of things change just with a small alteration of our position. And so if we go to where our brain is happy for a few strides, and then we go, okay, we're just going to go explore something new for a few strides, and you become aware. What do I feel? And I
Mhm.
find the first kind of awareness that bubbles up into our consciousness is super important for that person. And everybody gets a different little bubble of information that comes into the
Mhm.
brain. But it's
Right.
like they'll notice something. And even if we go back and forth, I go, some people have to spend 10 minutes telling me how awful it feels. And I go, that's fine. That's part of it. Right. So this feels good. This feels bad. This feels good. And then I go, "Well, now what else? Okay. We know that. So now what else? Okay. We know that. Now what else? Right. And that's how you start to wake up and refine our sense of touch,
Right.
is just exploring and noticing, what do I feel? And what
Yes.
the crazy part is, and I try to prepare the people for this, but it's hard. When it happens, throws everybody off. But in that rebooting process between normal and new, changing back and forth every few strides, the first sign of the nervous system integrating a new sense of balance is confusion. I go, everybody gets
I
confused.
don't know. I hear, I don't know. And I'm
I don't
like,
know.
perfect.
Perfect.
I'm glad you
Exactly.
don't know.
We're on our way.
We're going down a new path. I don't
Yeah.
know. Perfect. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I go, I watch the look on their face. They can't
Yep.
find the words. They can't quite decide which, if the old or the new feels better. All of a sudden, they're
Yeah.
not
It's
sure
very
where to be
confusing.
at all. Very confusing. So, as long as we're still in the state of confusion, we keep switching back and forth every few strides. And then a super interesting thing happens. It's either the new position either feels to the person like a blending of the old and the new. It's somewhere in between the old and the
Mhm.
new. Or what used to feel terrible now feels better, feels like it's the right place to
Right.
be. And I
The new
go,
circuits are rewiring.
yeah, so that's the body and the brain coming back into cohesive agreement about balance. And that
Right.
is
We're
the
like, we're gonna
brain.
not gonna die.
Yeah. And the brain is now going, okay, we've updated and we now have a new default setting. I'm good with that.
Right.
Right. And the crazy part is, like, it happens in 5 minutes is as fast as I've seen it happen. And 30 minutes is as long as I've ever seen it take. That back and
Mhm.
forth thing until the brain just goes, oh yeah, we like this place better. And then the
And
brain,
I
it's
wonder if the horses do it too. Giving them that,
absolutely.
creating that
Mhm.
space for them to explore. Like, and I know just from Alexander School, going through all those emotions that come with the change.
Well, and
You
that's
don't know
why,
how you're going to respond.
coming full circle back to aids and contacts, if we have our balance completely independent of how our horse moves, we have to have that to create space between the aids,
Mhm.
right?
I
And
agree.
and then what an elite level rider does is the same thing I'm describing I do for the rider. I go, the horse's body pulls back into the dysfunctional default. We give an aid,
Mhm.
we get a change towards something new, hopefully better coordination, right? The horse experiences the new, and if we keep giving aids to hold the horse in the new, they don't learn, right?
No, they
So
don't.
we,
It's just like kids.
yeah. And so when we let the horse lose balance again during a contact, right? So in a contact, we're listening. What are we listening for? I'm listening to go, is my horse going to choose to hold this coordination? Maybe their brain is saying, this feels weird, this feels wrong. Or maybe they don't have the muscle support to hold it. I go, maybe it's
Exactly.
hard for them.
Same thing with people.
So then I let the balance go because I'm independent, right? So I ask the horse to hold it. After my aid, I go back to a contact and I listen. Can you hold it? Can you not hold it? How long can you hold it? How easy is this for you? How
Mhm.
hard is it for you? Does it make you upset? Does it make you frustrated or are you okay with it? And then they fall back out of balance, right? And in that sort
Right.
of in the better strides and then losing balance for a few strides, it's exactly like us going back and forth between two riding positions in
Hmm.
order to convince our brain that this is the better way to go.
Right.
And so I go, if we're constantly holding our horse together with aids, they don't have that ability to compare and contrast. And so they go, why not just stay where the brain's happy, which is always normal,
Right.
even if it's horribly dysfunctional, it still feels
It's
normal.
like a codependent relationship at that point.
Something like that. Yeah. On a physical
Yeah,
level. Yeah.
on a physical level.
Yeah. And so that's why, like, the learning is always going to involve an error and then guidance, and then another error and then more
Yes.
guidance,
Hmm.
or an error and exploration, and then
Yeah, I like that.
more error and then more exploration. And if we don't give ourselves the situation, I guess, where we feel safe to do
Hmm.
that, or create the time, like if we don't create the space and give ourselves time to go through a learning curve, then how are we supposed to sort of do that on the fly while we're trying to be perfect and get a blue ribbon? Like I go, there,
Yeah,
that's not the time. That's not the time. Like we go to the show to show our training that we did at home.
that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But people who aren't feeling are trying to make every ride look like what the judge wants to see. And I go,
True.
then you lose the ability to communicate with the horse. You have no clue if you're giving effective aids or developing self-carriage because there's no space.
Right.
Like there's no distance between the aids to even recognize what the horse knows or what the horse doesn't know.
Right. I
So
agree.
I think creating the space to learn is just critical. Critical.
And with that learning comes a lot of mistakes, and we have to accept that
Hmm.
because that's the only way the consciousness of the being is going to know where the right place is.
Yeah. And in England, I loved it. They call what we call riding arenas, they call the school. And I loved calling it the
I like
school.
that.
Yeah, because our backyard riding arena or the one at our barn really is the classroom. Like that's the
It is the
place.
classroom.
Yeah. And it's not the place to prove to the teacher you can regurgitate information and get a good grade. That's not really learning. It's the place to make mistakes and experiment and explore and leave room. Expect error. Expect mistakes.
Expect error.
Hmm.
Yes,
And that it's not the end
I
of the
like that.
world. I go, it's not even the end of the world if our horse, if we're a passenger and our horse goes to the corner or the fence line or the gate and stops. I go, it's not the end of the world. Give a leg aid, they'll
Right,
turn, right? You don't
right,
even have to pick up the reins. And I go, most horses will not run their face into something. I go, there's some that could, maybe do. Sometimes you think they're going to, but at the very last minute, you realize how self-aware horses are because they'll go straight
exactly.
straight towards an object and we think they're going to crash. And then at the very last second, they turn and don't even scrape a whisker. I go, they just,
Right,
but we think we need them to turn 10 steps before they think they need to turn, which I always
exactly.
find really funny. But yeah,
I do
passenger
too.
riding, lunge line, lunging,
Hand
being the one on the lunge
walking.
line.
Hmm.
Yeah. Or even just having somebody lead the horse around while you sit on him
Yeah.
at the walk. I go, that is just
Yeah.
valuable learning space for all of us, no matter the level. I go, no matter our
Exactly.
level of riding, that is just
That's
valuable.
creating the space for being open.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
I guess we'll wrap it up there. I think we've been going about an hour. Hopefully you guys, thank you for subscribing. Our subscribers are going up. So that is what, like subscribing, commenting, liking, sharing is actually how this information gets spread around the ethers. So
Yeah.
if you
The
think what
ethers.
we talk about um, is useful to the horse world, then commenting, sharing, thumbs up, subscribing, downloading, all of that stuff, those numbers are what make the platforms send it around more. So that's how you could help us
Yes.
spread this information if you are so
Thank
inclined.
you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Yep.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.